The real fight, if we're intent on having one, the real culture combat, bracketing for the moment actual physical conflicts in this world, is not among cultural producers dueling it out in a public arena. It's rather a contest between culture workers of all stripes and the ensconced neoliberal administration of our cultural institutions. It's not the shock of art that's the trouble, it's the shock doctrine, the embrace of crisis in order to make structural adjustments. This is the real venue of culture combat. We've even ended up with this rather specious notion of a culture war, a propagandistic idea pitting left against right, but only in superficial terms. Civilization against civilization. Concerning ourselves with culture war in this sense is akin to tilting at windmills. We take our eyes off the prize. Like Rastas and reggae musicians, our embrace of cultural politics, our disavowal of state power, serves also to vacate the field of responsible political action, in effect, strengthening the right-wing assault on social democracy. In taking a cultural turn away from politics, qua politics, what do we cede? Do we give up participatory democracy for participatory culture? Or does participatory culture have the power to transform politics itself, as might be seen with the election of Obama, even if his administration has yet to distinguish itself in this regard as his campaign did? If we hold out such hope for participatory culture, shouldn't we shun combat for cultivation? In something of a side project, ethnomusicologist Anthony McCann has been exploring the idea of gentleness, which, as I've hinted, is one way to describe the non-combative approach I'm attempting to endorse. He connects it directly to hope and to politics. And I quote, "An attitude of gentleness can allow us to live the possibilities of hope as a realistic engagement with the here and now of our relationships and circumstances. Crafting gentleness," he continues, "can remind us that hope works better when it's here." I'd like to piggyback gently on this notion as I attempt to wrap up my remarks here. I want to close by asking a rhetorical question, remixing a familiar phrase. Fight or flight? And I don't mean run when I say flight here. I refer instead to flights of vision, of fancy, if you will, of art and craft. In other words, let's ask not with which we are in conflict in the cultural realm, but instead what we would like to affirm, to project, to represent. This sentiment resonates for me with a relatively recent meditation by Bruno Latour, that's it, wondering whether critique, by which he refers to the deconstructive practices of the academic left, has run out of steam. Tellingly, he begins his piece with the following: wars, so many wars. Wars outside and wars inside, cultural wars, science wars, and wars against terrorists. Wars against poverty and wars against the poor. Wars against ignorance and wars out of ignorance. My question is simple. Should we be at war too? We, the scholars, the intellectuals, it's really our duty to add fresh ruins to the field of ruins. This vibes well with something Jace Clayton wrote recently, also known as DJ Rupture, our guest here next week as a member of Nettle, the geography-defying musical ensemble. Clayton writes provocatively but carefully about music, in part because of his distrust of certain fixed categories, a distrust no doubt informed by his travels in the transnational world, as well as bred from the experience of being black in a society that limit the possibilities for someone who looks like he does. Seeming to refer at once to geopolitics and to genre, Clayton asserted that, quote, "we make a border real by policing it. Likewise, we make violence endemic by doing it, even as metaphor. As Voloshinov famously observed, the word is the ideological phenomenon par excellence. Embedded in social relations, the terms we employ are not innocent. They're not disconnected from ongoing systems of domination and dehumanization, permitting the kind of combat that results not in grants ungranted, but in deaths and wounds and scars of all sorts. To the extent that we reproduce these structures, that we reproduce ourselves and our others and our institutions and our values, this preoccupation with violence is, at least to some extent, and in some venues, up to us." What I mean to say is that, to return to the conference call, in the face of such shock and awe, we might do well to respond not by turning up the volume or the heat, but by cultivating an altogether different and more careful approach to how we produce and reproduce our culture and the social relations embodied and embedded therein. Not 6 million ways to die, not even 6 million ways to fight, but rather 6 million ways to write. Choose with care. Thank you.